Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining this DynamicsCon session. First, I want to say thank you for everybody that voted and voted for this session and all the other ones. So great to be a part of this conference and to be able to share some of this content. This session, again, is titled GP Trending Topics. And a little bit about myself to get us started here. My name is John Kirsch. I am the GP Product Lead at SA Global, formerly known as Dynamic Consulting. So we are going through a little bit of merger, so you might see some of those names in my past are going on right now. My experience personally has been 23 plus years now of GP experience. So a little bit listed on the left-hand side there. I've worked as a consultant for a number of years now. I've also worked with GP in the role of controller as an IT manager. So I've had a lot of different hands-on experience kind of on both sides of the table, and happy to share some of that experience and in particular what's new with GP or what's trending and current. In addition to that, I do have a personal life. I'm a husband and father of 5 kids. They keep me pretty busy, and most of my hobbies and things going on revolve around what sports or music or activities are going there, which is fun and kind of helps keep us all youthful, right? A couple other things on the right-hand side. I am a GP certified individual, so I've taken a number of the tests both from Microsoft and from some other organizations over time. I've presented at a number of different conferences, including my 3rd DynamicsCon here. So again, thanks for all those who have participated over the years. One other personal note, I am the Vice President at the Golden House in Green Bay. It's a domestic violence shelter and advocacy program. And I've been involved for 3 or 4 years now with that organization, and really encourage everybody to find those areas that are near and dear and to volunteer and help out in the community. It means a lot to those that need that support. There's a couple other spots where my contact information is, like it is on the bottom right here. Definitely encourage, if you have questions, you can reach out to me at some point as a follow-up, but definitely during this time, please submit a question or comments, whatever you have for thoughts going on, please put those in the comments. I'm happy to see that engagement of the community throughout the time here. So let's jump into the content here. So the trending topic here, as I chose to submit and those that voted on, is really what we've been hearing recently. So what those topics are as far as requests or support, or what's going on in the industry and related to the ERP software. A lot of these are requested multiple times over the past year or so, and I kind of went back and looked at what tickets do we have, what projects have we been working on, and what do we see. And I like to also look at it as far as what's a little bit different or what's happening specific to current things, such as audits. We tend to see over time that certain pieces of the audit or certain parts become more popular or more requested. And so I like to kind of wrap that up and share that information for those that maybe don't get that view of multiple companies or see what's going on, or maybe just matching up to say, hey, I had that same request and seems to be fitting right in line with what I have going on too. So it's always nice to hear that. So again, these topics, in the end, there's 10 of them here that we're going to go through. And these are some of the biggest ones that we've had in terms of volume and need. And I'm happy to share those. So let's get started here. The first one we're going to go ahead and talk about is data protection. So this one probably doesn't just pertain to any single part of technology or IT, right? This is pervasive in seemingly everything right now. Data protection can mean a few different things, as I have laid out here. I'm definitely not covering it all either. I'm going to focus a little bit more in GP specific, but you can obviously kind of branch out your thoughts here into the other IT and technology related areas. So again, honing in on GP, first the backup part of it in the first list here. One of the things that tends to happen, this isn't necessarily new, but it just doesn't ever seem to go away, is backups. And being a topic in that inevitably There are times where backups fail, the schedule stops running, it just gets missed getting set up when you move to a new server. There's a lot that can happen, and backups are so critical to all of the pieces under this data protection. It's really important. Double check. If you take one thing away from here, we'll start with the first one. Go and check, or have somebody who has access check the schedule, the frequency that your backups are running, that they're successful. If anything fails, if we've got to roll back, if the year-end close didn't go right, there's a lot of reasons why we might need to rely on a backup. So double check that, double check to the success, and lastly, also double check the success by restoring it to, like a test company, restoring just some of that data, not over the top of your production, but just knowing that it's completely successful and that you can restore it. It's such a big piece. Almost once a month, I would say, we end up seeing some sort of backup, either not fully backing up to the level that somebody wanted, or it failed for a period of time. So I can't stress that one enough. The other couple of pieces noted on there, security of backups is just as important as the overall security in your network. If I take a GP database that's backed up, I could go to another system and see all of the data that was on there. So I need to make sure that that's locked up, secure, and that somebody doesn't have access that should not be going into that data. The last piece I'll talk about with a couple of these other topics on this data protection, but the off-site piece and also disconnected, so not on your network, is really important. We're going to talk about that when it comes to a data breach, or especially ransomware. We need to be able to get to that data, and if it's on-prem and something happens to the physical server or server room, I need to know that it's somewhere else to get to it. Even if we're running in the cloud and virtually, it needs to be in another data center. So again, whether it's physical or some sort of malware attack, we're protected. Okay, so then disaster recovery, kind of, again, backups is certainly a part of that, but there's a bit more. What is that scenario if we're really down, if that server crashes, if our cloud site is offline? How long can I go without it? How fast do I have to recover? Cost is certainly a factor. I mean, if I'm going to be redundant with everything, I'm doubling or more of the cost of my environment. But if it's essential, I may need to do that, right? But really plan that strategy, plan that time, because inevitably if something goes down and you're at that level of critical, downtime, then you're going to want to have that plan and have thought through this ahead of time. Nothing's going to go 100% as planned, but if you have that, you're going to be relieved of a lot of the extra stress that may be happening. So plan that out, not just having a backup, but what are some of those disaster scenarios. Last on this topic, kind of lump them together on the right side there with the data breach and ransomware. If we have some sort of hack in our systems, if ransomware gets in and locks things down, we're at a critical point then. Hopefully we have some backups. We're going to need an expert involved in how to handle that. I'm going to talk a little bit more on those couple of topics there, but how do we prevent that? How do we have policies in place? Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, also, again, the backups in place so we can recover from that. So we need to try to prevent that. That includes training on the topic there too. So this topic overall goes a little bigger than just GP, but is certainly critical and needs to be part of your overall plan. Certainly if IT is handling that outside of maybe the accounting area, and we can piggyback off of that, let's do that, but let's be sure we have a plan in place here. All right. Going on to my next one, this one comes to mind in particular with audits. So I had a number of requests this year as audits are going on and finishing up at different times for different levels of change tracking. And some of this is audit, and then there's some non-audit type items as well. So the topics on the left-hand side for this one are some different reasons why I've had the requests come in. Audit in particular with the first 2 or 3 with user setups or users getting deleted on the system. We wanted to see who and when and what those users were and who made those changes. And not only brand new users, but that pertains as well to the security changes of existing users. Did they add a role? Did they remove one, etc.? Kind of going along with that in audits, a lot of times, kind of measuring the protection that's in place, new vendors in particular, or the AP side of things are always of higher kind of evaluation. So how do we have some of those measures that vendors are approved, or that that we aren't changing addresses or bank information and all those things that go along with it. In addition to that, vendor master records are certainly part of it, but even customer master records and other ones throughout the system. And then the last, which is not necessarily audit, but inevitably we get questions too, right? Who changed that email address? Who saved that new account? Who created it, etc. So there's day-to-day activity that that oftentimes, again, master records are typically the higher higher requested topic from my perception, but we want to know who and what happened. So we have some options in GP. We do have the GP activity tracking. So as we get into solutions, and I'm going to pop open one of the GP windows here for us to take a look at. So the GP activity tracking has a number of different options. So you can see those on the screen. We can track login information, accessing certain information, even some change tracking, if you will, for some of the master records. But it is limited amount of information. So when I say tracking of the change, if we set that setting to say whenever somebody changes a master record, we want to see that. Well, what that means though is we simply get a record saying this record changed by this person on that date. So there's not information in terms of did they change an email address or physical address or phone number or whatever that might be. So it's not tracking the detail of it. It's just giving us at least a starting point of a high level of what was changed and what day. The other piece though that goes with it is it's also tracking every time we essentially hit the save button, because GP is not recognizing if it's actually changing something or we just hit save because that's our habit and we hit it, and it's fine, it doesn't hurt anything, but it put another record in this table as if it changed. So that could be a reason. If you want to get to that more granular level and see some of the details, we might look at an alternative option here. So one of those would be SQL, and I've done this where we have some limited number of tracking. So if we're not looking at tracking a large amount of information, there are some limitations on field types, but as long as it's not one of the note fields, we're pretty flexible on what we can do, and we can essentially set up some triggers in the database to take an event, the trigger that is insert or delete or change, and we can go ahead and add the before and after records to another table and create like a smart list or a report that you can use for it. So again, it takes a little bit of time, kind of custom scripts to put that together and some custom reports. But if you're doing a smaller amount, certainly one or two of those tables being monitored that way works well. Some alternative options listed, a few ISVs that we've worked with recently. FastPath, Rockton, Titanium GP, all have options. I'm not going to go into the details, but again, just kind of sharing some of the solution options that are out there for you. So if you need that full tracking, want to track potentially all of the system or a large amount of tables, like all of the master records, certainly, and also what data is changing, those ISVs can be a good solution for that. All right, moving on to our next topic, reporting. So this one, is trending and definitely not new though. So reporting seems to be an ongoing request, what's out there, what's available. There are some newer tools that have been added over the past few years, and there's kind of the older, the steady ones that we've relied on and are still really good and can get our job done here. So, I listed those on the left-hand side here as far as kind of core tools that we've been using and are using now. Smart List certainly for list reportings, or Excel Refreshable for those either not in GP or larger amounts of data. I do see a lot of activity still where we've relied on Smart Lists and just haven't been using the Excel Refreshable, or the GP data has grown over time. And we can get that same data directly in Excel, have it be faster, don't need that export utility to run. So highly recommend if we're using Smart Lists and exporting to Excel on a routine basis, let's explore those Excel refreshable a little bit more. SSRS reports, is seemingly kind of a hit or miss. Some environments use them very, very heavily. Once they start using them, I see a trend to continue to use them more and more because they are very effective. And there's a large amount of environments that aren't using those, just haven't experienced those or just haven't seen a need for those. But again, a really good option if we are looking for additional reporting from GP. Couple of the newer players in the game, Power BI, which again has been around several years now though, but gaining more and more popularity. If we need those dashboards, it's really growing, I think, though, of usage as well as kind of overall application of the usage here. So Power BI continues to grow. If you haven't looked at that tool, we can run that just on-prem if you're not using the full service and right at the SQL database, or we can use this in the web and through the cloud by using the full service. So some good options there, allows that flexibility to use it out of the office. The last one is an ISV solution, PopDoc, that I'll mention. It's basically described as a smart list in the cloud. So we're able to add a gateway and a connector to be able to go ahead and use that smart list again out of the office. And what I'll mention with that, as well as Power BI especially, but really any one of these, is what is also a trend is connecting multiple data sources together, though. Certainly happening more and more, and we can do this again with these tools, is to pull from not only GP, but maybe you have a separate HR system, or maybe you're running, a different internal maintenance program or things like that, where we want to see some of those reports all together. And as long as we have a data source that we can connect to, which most we can with a lot of these tools, is we can go ahead and write those reports together, so we don't have to look at this information separately. So that is one of the things that if you're struggling with that, it's a good opportunity to review some of these options and what you might be able to connect and streamline your capabilities, so you're not pulling things together from multiple locations. One other topic on the right hand side, and I added this one, it's a little bit less of a topic, I think, than some of the other reports that I mentioned here, but some are looking for more out of their financial reporting and using MR or Management Reporter. So again, we know Management Reporter works on the current and will work on the newer versions of Windows and SQL. So it's being maintained as far as compatibility with technology, but is not being developed for new features. So if you're looking for something more that's not in the system, then we're going to start to look outside of MR and look for a third-party application that can add those features into your environment. So I've listed a few that we've been working with recently here. There are a ton of other options out there, so certainly can explore. But we've had some good experiences in working to add functionality where it's needed. So those are a few options of the many that are available. All right, moving on. Next one, we're going to talk about GP in the cloud. So the question or the comments are very different in terms of the request for what that means. So using GP in the cloud, does that mean I need to be able to launch the program anywhere and use it? Does that mean I need to get certain data or certain reports? I need to connect with a customer, vendor, etc. There's different requests and usage and needs all over. So I tried to lump this into one slide, and we'll try to stay within the time limits here. But certainly this can be very specific to any environment. So I kind of ran down the higher levels though here. The overall usage though, whether you're on-prem or if you're in the cloud, we can do any of this the same way. It's just a matter of setting up the right security and gateways and things like that set up so that we can use the tools that are out there. So overall, can the GP application be run from anywhere essentially? And the answer is definitely yes. Again, whether on-prem or in the cloud, typically we're going to share out that RDS session, or we're going to have a web client installed and access that. So that might mean different connections. Again, we might need a VPN running first and then running the RDS. We might have some other, again, sort of connection tools that are in place first to get that working. But we certainly can do that and have folks doing that from all across the world, really running the application regardless of where they're at. So we have that option. Moving on, if we're going to start to look at some of those pieces, a big thing over the past couple of years has been approvals. And whether we're using the GP workflow or we're starting to use some of the other add-on or tools around it, we can certainly do those workflows from outside of the office, if you will. So again, on-prem or in the cloud. So the GP workflow needs a little bit of security setup, not difficult at all if you've gone through that setup before. It just takes a little bit of time, and we can add a certificate and be able to create those workflow approvals from anywhere, from your phone, from a different computer, etc. Again, if we need a little bit more advanced tools and options, Power Automate or Power Apps has been used to create some. There are some ISV solutions around that as well. Or again, you can create your own if you know the connections and be able to set that up for the approvals. And then ISVs, again, some may have some with the Power Platform and using those, and some may have their own approval processes as well. So especially some of the document management solutions, many of those are hosted in the cloud at this point and have that approval process available for you without, again, having to be on-prem or without even having to be into a full client at times. Moving on, I kind of touched on the reporting, so I'm not going to spend too much more time here, but listed a couple of those options. Again, there are a number of reporting tools, especially the financial ones, which barely scrape the surface there, but many of those are cloud hosted. And if they're in the cloud, again, there's some sort of data connection that's already happening, and oftentimes we can access that even with our phone or mobile device or whatever it may be. Last one I'll mention, again, seems to have picked up a bit more in the past year or so, are different portals. And I listed a couple of thoughts around this, but they're really usually, kind of unique requests in terms of, different scenarios. So are we doing business to business, or are we doing, just some e-commerce things or whatever it may be. But we've seen an increase of portal requests, customer and for payments and invoices has been one of them. And so we even within that category see some varying. So some of that is strictly to look up past invoices and submit a payment. Some may be to tie into an e-commerce store and some different variations within there. So there are a number of solutions. Typically, we do work with some of the ISVs for those solutions. If that is something that you're looking for, I think this is a good one to really work with your partner, have a conversation, really lay out the requirements and what you're looking for, because there are a lot of good options out there. But it's important to pick the right one because they all vary in functionality a little bit differently. So moving on, another one that is definitely not new to GP at all, but we continue to see more and more companies moving from outside tracking, other systems, other software, or maybe even Excel spreadsheet or whatever it might be, moving that fixed assets into GP. This is a great tool. Everybody owns it with starter packs, so you own it. That's been that way for a number of years now. But it's really not a difficult setup to do in GP for a majority of companies, and can make that month-end processing, if that's when you're depreciating, a whole lot easier, just streamlined. Once you get those set up in the system, it's typically very, very reliable in terms of do the depreciation, post to the GL, and you can move on. So it's a great kind of quick win if you've been tracking that manually, having to tie things out manually and go through that process every month. It's a great tool. So I highly encourage, if you're in that scenario, take a look at it. And again, could be a quick win in terms of easing your month end and your processing time. A couple of the other requests we've had, even if you are using it, a little bit of help in cleaning up, refreshing of the usage, as I call it. Sometimes just the retiring or disposing of assets didn't go quite right. Maybe you're not using the GL posting features. You've been manually creating the entries. You want a little bit of help and time to get that flowing smoothly again. Those are all things that a partner can help with, or you can get a little bit of help on a forum or something like that. Just some advice on how to clean some of those things up. So highly encouraged to maybe kind of look at those standard tools that are in there that maybe we haven't been taking full advantage of, because this is one that many over this past year have really kind of looked at it, and I've seen improve that process, save themselves some time, and just make their lives a little bit easier. So we're about halfway through the list. A couple of these are going to go a little bit quicker here, but I do want to again remind everybody, if you have some questions for the live Q&A session at the end of this, please go ahead and put those in. We'll be monitoring, and we'll try to answer all of those at the end. So the next topic here, electronic banking. So again, as more and more electronic pieces are in place, we've seen a higher volume of requests for this. First one on the list also could have been listed in that fraud prevention slide earlier, but SafePay is really key for protecting, again, those payments and checks and things like that, to validate those for the bank. Might be called positive pay or something else by your bank, but in GP we refer to it as SafePay. So that is a pretty quick setup as well. So highly encourage, again, those little wins. If we think, some of these things can be added very quickly, add that extra security, certainly want to take advantage of those. So similarly, electronic reconcile, as well as potentially importing like bank transactions that are going on, especially as we have a lot more of that electronic banking with EFTs and things going on. Certainly can set that up. Might be a little bit more time than SafePay, just because those file formats can be a little bit trickier than SafePay typically. But again, not an overly difficult task to go ahead and do, especially for the time savings on a repetitive basis that you can typically gain from those. And then a few other ideas over on the right there. We've seen, again, a little bit of increase on the vendor EFT or customer EFT setup. So if we're paying by EFT and we want GP to send out that file, or if we want to pull the funds on the customer receivable side, been seeing an increase in that setup as well. In the last, a newer feature in GP is those credit card transactions. So again, recommend to check out some of those new features, what's new in GP, and the ability to go ahead and use an existing format that's already out there to potentially bring in your credit card transactions. So I'm going to make another little note, not calling out on a separate slide here, but we've certainly continued to have other integrations as everything is more and more electronic. We continue to have those type of requests, whether it be sales orders, purchase orders being exported, things like that. We certainly see those continue to be requested and to be added into systems. So kind of an honorable mention here with the other electronic bankings are those other integrations that, again, typically are a bit more custom or would want to look for a solution that's already developed for that. So another topic that highly encourage, gather the requirements first, and then that's a good time to talk with your partner, do a little bit of research, and find the best solution for you. All right, so moving on, email. This one has been a really hot topic over the last month, and if it affected you, you probably already know about this, but we've seen some issues with connections with the Office 365 or Exchange 365 over the past month or so, and there's some really important information to understand here. So first, the first point there, I just wanted to list out, just so we're all aware, there's two primary connections when we're talking about emailing, or I'm talking about emailing here, is when we're emailing like some of the forms, so sales orders or purchase orders or the related forms like that, remittances from the payable side. So there's two main connections there. We can use the MAPI connection, which is essentially using or connecting to like your local mail client, like your Outlook client. And the key with that is it does need to be 32-bit to not have issues. So it's compatible with the 32-bit version because GP is 32-bit application. So it's important to understand that, as a lot of companies are moving to the 64-bit versions of the applications. Or the other option is to connect to Exchange, which is Office 365, or if you do have on-prem Exchange, you would be able to connect to that as well. But what we've seen over the past month or so is a number of issues and tickets generated from connections to the Office 365. There are security changes, and I'm not going to go into all of those here, But there have been security changes going on, and the big change is coming in October, is that the modern authentication, as it's called, it's really, as we think about it, the multi-factor authentication is needed going forward. So starting in October, that's going to be needed. So if we're on a version older than 18.4, which is the current release, we should really be targeting to upgrade before October if you're using the email features that are connecting to Exchange. I've been troubleshooting these with a few clients, and when we are working with the newer version of GP, we've been able to move through those much more efficiently. It's been a challenge if we're on an older version, and it's only going to become more difficult or again hit kind of a roadblock once we get to October. So really important to understand that if you're on an older version of GP, again, start to make some plans, get that in the discussion over the next few months, so that you don't run into a time, in October where, listen, that functionality is not working for you. Really, it goes back to that fraud prevention or security data protection slide, is that this will allow you to set up the multi-factor authentication or MFA. And it's really not that difficult. You do need the right permissions to be able to get in there. But once you do, you can set that up, you can use that login, and you're using a more secure connection for it. So highly encouraged to get that on the docket very soon. All right, so speaking of that, on a similar topic, the annual update. So it is related in terms of if you haven't applied, again, those latest releases, we want to get there for the email issue. But really highly encourage everybody to make a plan to get on this annual update schedule. So every year now, the annual release is released in October. If you do apply the year-end update, so if you around the end of November when that gets released, if you apply that, certainly recommend to wait until that gets released and kind of do that all in one step. But do recommend to get to that current version each year. I mean, we just talked about the email slide there. That shows you those things that come up. Technologies change really outside of the control of GP in terms of the email and security changes are prompting a change there. So we want to stay on top of those on top of those issues, and make sure we are running that compatible software so that we can avoid trouble and outages and things like that. Also gets us those latest usability features are largely where those are targeted. So it just helps our lives be a little bit easier in the various areas. So like to get those newest features and be able to apply those as well. But again, would recommend then if you don't need that though, if you don't need the year-end update that I mentioned, plan a different time in the year. So if March is your slowest time of the year for your business cycle, then that'd be a great time to go ahead and do some planning ahead of time, know when you're going to apply that update. For most, it is not a large project. For many, it's a pretty straightforward, just make sure we have backups. We know we're going to take a little bit of time to have to touch all the workstations if you have that deployed that way, but it's a relatively small project. If we're applying that every year and we know we're on a supported path to have that version tested from updating from one to the other. All right, just a couple of topics to finish up here, and one is maintenance. So I've had some questions as different maintenance has been discussed here, and some of those topics are a little bit of confusion, if you will, on what exactly is maintenance. And so there is SQL maintenance and there's GP maintenance, and so those while they do relate a little bit, there are some key differences, some big differences, and some really necessities in one versus the other. So I wanted to put this in here because again, I've heard some of these questions over time. Jumping into the GP maintenance, it's become a little bit less and less needed or required at least in some or most environments to run some of the checklinks and reconcile on a regular basis. So there's a little bit differing opinions on there on how often or if you need to run those at all. Checklinks, just to give a brief description for those not familiar, does basically compare some of the integrity of the data between the tables. So if there's a header in a line table, it's checking to make sure that records exist in both of them, or trying to do its best to kind of fix that up, if you will. Whereas the reconcile is a process that really kind of retotals. So inventory reconcile, for those using inventory, is a process that most run at some point or multiple times during the year. And that will essentially kind of recount each item, so we know how many are on hand, how many are allocated, things like that. So those are the GP key maintenance items, and those have changed a little bit. So as we moved to SQL Server many years ago, became much more reliable than some of the um, file systems and individual files that were involved in that Checklinks process. So that has reduced the need to do that quite as much. Many don't run this at very regular intervals, and some run it at a very scheduled time and have been reevaluating that time. You don't want to avoid issues is the main thing I would say. So if you are routinely or are routinely running reconcile or running checklinks and is routinely finding issues, my point of view would be to go in and try to figure out what is causing those issues. If it's an integration, if it's computers locking up, whatever it might be, let's try to solve the root issue, and maybe then we can reduce the need to rely on some of those functions. Or if it continues to happen, though, we don't want to have data issues going on within the system. So we would want to make sure we're not causing a problem that way. But if we can get to that root cause, we certainly can reduce that usage. What we can't reduce is the SQL maintenance. So I mentioned backups earlier. We certainly need those in place. We definitely need the indexes to be reorganized or reindexed at times. So most systems at least once a week. If we're in a high production environment, meaning a lot of inventory transactions, sales transactions, high volumes, I often will run those once a day even. So usually in the night hours. And there are built-in plans with SQL that we can set up or tasks that we can use, or we can write scripts that will be more specific to those. So it just depends on the database and the usage level, but we definitely need to have those SQL maintenance pieces in place. And if we go a long time without indexes being evaluated and reorganized, we're going to have some definite performance issues that build up over time. So this is another thing that certainly a partner can help out with, or if IT is familiar with SQL, can go in and just validate that we have a plan running at least once a week and that we know we're protected on the SQL side. All right, last one here. And this one has been a varying size request, and again, not a brand new type of thing, but it's one of those things that it's always good to take a little bit of time and just have a discussion, right? See what is working, what's not working. If you think we can use things a little bit better, that's the way a lot of times this is approached. And this doesn't have to be a big process, but doing a process improvement review is something that can certainly help and identify capabilities. So I've done a few of these this past year. Some are specific to a certain module, a certain group, and some have been kind of across the board on GP and evaluating overall how things are used. It gives a good chance to make sure you're using the new features, using the new technologies that are out there, look for opportunities to streamline things. So sometimes, as I put on the end, you don't know what you don't know. It's not your job to stay on top of every technology that's out there and what's going on, but sometimes just spending a little bit of time reviewing what those may be and what those capabilities are can certainly open the door to some new capabilities. So if you've covered all the bases on the other ones, or just feel like there's a little bit more that could be done, do a small targeted one first, try it out, and see what you can gain by engaging somebody to help with a little bit of a review of the system. So again, please keep adding any comments and questions to the chat here. We'll be live here in a couple of seconds and we'll answer those. I want to thank everybody again, though, for attending this session, for voting for this session, just for being part of the DynamicsCon and the overall community. Certainly enjoy giving presentations, engaging like the live connection here. So as much as we can with the comments. Again, feel free to check out some of the sites here for some blogs and content. And thanks again for being part of this conference. Hey, Sean.
Hey, John. Great session.
Thanks. I see you have a green curtain. I missed the green. I wasn't thinking this morning getting all St. Patrick's ready. So I guess I dropped the ball a little bit of that one, but happy to be on here and answer some questions on the session. So appreciate it.
You got it. So yeah, I took the easy road out and just sat near the green curtain. So, hey, great session of fantastic topics. We had good chat through in the chat during the session. I was able to capture some questions. So one of the questions that we had was regarding the tracking, if that was by company or for the entire system for the, I think you called it the sort of like a change log.
Yeah, you can really any of those. I kind of presented 3 options in there. Any of those could be set up at the company level or across the whole system. So they're all configurable, depends what you want to track. Again, a little bit varying depending on what solution you're using. I would say the GP or the ISV solution, probably a little bit easier to turn on, just by selecting the company essentially that you're running that for and being able to pick that. If you're going that custom script, a lot of times it can be copy and pasted across the companies, but we'd have to essentially write the script in one company, go to the next database, put that in place. So if you have a bunch of companies, probably just a little bit more work to do that if you're going that custom route. But yeah, certainly you can pick and choose and decide where you're going to turn that on.
Very good, very good. So pick and choose, I like that. I also like that you said on your last slide there, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes I don't know what I'm supposed to know. Speaking of not knowing what I'm supposed to know, one of the questions was about the important message, John, that you shared about the email capability and emailing out of GP. So can you just talk about that? I know you did during the session, but these were recorded a little while ago. Maybe add a little color there.
Yeah, we had a lot of not fun, I should say, right, about with email a little bit ago. So I kind of mentioned in there, folks that it affected them, they knew what was going on because we spent probably with our clients spent a fair amount of time working through that because it hit all of a sudden. But so there's the changes going on, right? So modern authentication is going to kick in October. So October 1st is your deadline. If you're emailing out a GP, and the key is if you're connecting to Office 365 servers, so that exchange option in GP. If you're using that, the modern authentication is required as of October 1st, which means, if you're using email now and you get the pop-up where like you have multi-factor turned on and you get kind of that separate window to log into the Microsoft window, and you have to enter your email address and another one pops up then for your password, that's getting into the modern authentication. And really, once you turn that on in GP, you get that same interface like you get with other applications. So once you get into it, you're probably already using it somewhere else and used to it. It's not a big deal. And the setup isn't that overly difficult either if you're an IT person and have dealt with that stuff. It's it's a bit of a setup, kind of almost a step-by-step to go through, and you can get it configured. But it's really good in terms of, we'll add that security. Email kind of hacking and things like that are prevalent, unfortunately, and so this helps with that. And so it's a good thing security wise. But we need to be on the latest release to get rid of the kind of bugs and connectivity issues that are going on there, and just be on that platform that we know is secure. So the short for this time window, know that October 1st is your cutoff. You need to be on really 18.3 or 4. Let's get to 18.4 and know that we've got that all set up and ready to work for you.
Very good. So 2 things that sound really good together is modern and GP. I like that. So October 1st is the date, and stay current on the latest release. Those are things that we've talked about with our customers and folks in the community for years and years. It's just a little easier now, right, with the modern life cycle. to be as current, right?
Yeah, and commenting, I know Carol put a comment in there, I think too, about the timing of that, and that's one of my suggestions with it. Has been for a number of years now with the release cycle going on, is pick a good time for you. If you need the tax updates at year end, if you're doing payroll, 1099s, and you need that update, we've been doing that probably for years. Then we're going to install it somewhere around December and get that installed, and you get that latest release with it. But if you don't need it, pick the best time of the year outside of that window, I would say, because partners are busy. If you're getting help from your partner, you're probably busy closing the year, and people want vacation around Christmas for some reason. Those type of things are going on. So let's pick a more convenient time, but it can be done, and it's typically not a huge project now. We can do that accurately, confidently. We just go through a thorough process with backups and things like that, and can get that in place. So pick a good time, but do it. Let's avoid the crunch time of, oh no, October is coming up in this situation, I need to update because I haven't done that for a couple of years.
Right.
You can be proactive with it.
Proactive is key. Very good. Great message. So another topic in the chat was about, from your content, was about checklinks. So some folks have heard some horror stories about checklinks. Can you talk about some of the necessary precautions around running checklinks?
Yeah, I mean, number one, if you're going to run checklinks, or when you run checklinks, you need to back up first. There's no undo to checklinks. So if it goes through and says there's some sort of essentially referential integrity between these tables, I'm going to fix it. And it fixes it, whatever it thinks the best way is. So typically not a problem, but occasionally it can be, and you don't want to be that occasion. So we for sure want to back up. Everybody needs to be out of the system. So we don't have control of what the computer is thinking during that process. I have a lot of environments that don't run checklinks at all, or maybe once a year, and around year end, just to make sure things are clear. If we know, again, we're on a stable platform with SQL, we're not having computer lockouts because we're doing updates and maintenance and the things we need to do, GP will accurately update all the tables it needs to. So the stable platform is the big difference. Not that it wasn't stable in the past, but it was just a whole different world when we were running on C-Tree and B-Tree, and the folks that know what that even is anymore. So yeah, number one, troubleshoot the issues we're having, try to solve those first, and really eliminate that need for checklinks. If you need it, or again, occasionally want to run it, plan that time. It's going to take a while to run. Do that backup first, review the results before you let people back in, because it will go through that fixing process. So just plan that, do it thoroughly, or even run it in a test company first before you run it in your production.
Great advice. I've always said, if you're going to run checklinks once, consider running it often. Because rather than dealing with all of the stuff once a year, you can microanalyze it on a monthly basis or weekly basis. One other thing here, we're getting short on time. Great stuff. Appreciate all of the feedback here. Was about checklinks again, but John, who should run checklinks? And is there information out in the web, on the web, about what checklinks is and what it does?
Yeah, there's definitely information out there. It could be anybody that's a system administrator really running it, but again, you need a backup before. So a lot of times it's in conjunction, or maybe the IT group that's involved with supporting the application running that backup. There is the schedule, so it runs as kind of like the schedule reports ran. But that kicks off at midnight. Just be aware, you can't pick to say run this at 2 in the morning or 5 in the morning or something like that. It's going to run at midnight on the day you schedule it. So a little bit limited, but better than nothing, right? So we can certainly schedule that, but you need system admin rights basically to be able to run that checklinks. So, or the right, security rights in GP basically. So typically whoever your GP administrator is, or again, IT involved with that.
Perfect. Well, we're out of time, John. Excellent session.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Thanks everybody again, and hope everybody has a great day.